Hello, Internet. It is Sabrok, and welcome back to my series on how to play 4th edition for people who have mainly played 5th edition. This is the big one, right? We're talking about combat. Am I going to get through all the combat rules? I'm not sure. I think so. So let's just get right into it. This is going to be a lot of rules. This is going to be a dense section, and it is going to be where you're going to notice a lot of very specific, very obvious differences from the game that you may be used to. So combat begins with the same thing as it does in 5th edition, the initiative roll, and it is still based on dexterity. However, since it is a ability check, you are going to add half of your level to the roll. So you do get better at initiative as you go on, but it all kind of more or less cancels out. So after initiative, with the initiative roll, you determine who goes first. If I recall correctly, the idea of group initiative had not yet been really codified in the rules. So the idea, I think the rules kind of assume that the DM is going to be rolling for each enemy individually. Most people just roll initiative for the single type of monster, and then that whole group of monsters goes at the same time. The surprise round. I do want to touch real quick on the surprise round. So if some monsters are surprised, then they do not act in the surprise round. They have a turn but don't do anything. People who do act in the surprise round only get one action. So you don't get a full turn. So on your turn in combat, you have 3 actions. You have your standard action, your move action, and your minor action. Standard action is going to be primarily for your attacks. Nearly every, 98% of all attack abilities are going to be a standard action to do. So it is the equivalent of the 5th edition action. Your move action is, instead of just getting free movement that you use as you please on your turn, you have to take an explicit action to move. So movement is slightly more restricted in 4th edition. But there are lots of different kinds of movements that you can take. So actually you have more options for how to use your movement. It's just that it's slightly more... You can't be as loosey-goosey with it as you can in 5th. You can't split movement easily because you have to fully complete an action before you take another action. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust this camera just slightly there. And then you have your minor action. Your minor action is going to be used for a lot of sort of miscellaneous stuff. Rarely involves any attack rolls. Occasionally will do a bit of automatic damage. But for the most part, it's going to be defensive, buffing, just sort of this incidental kind of thing. Healing also generally is a minor action. Any healing that isn't a minor action tends to not be that great because it's not a minor action. So you have those 3 actions, and you can always trade down. So they are in order: standard action, move action, minor actions, biggest to smallest. And you can always trade a bigger action for a smaller one, but you can't trade back up. So you can, if you want, take 3 minor actions in a turn, or 2 move actions and a minor, if you want, or 2 minors and a standard. There are 2 kinds of off-turn actions. You have your opportunity actions, which are mostly used for opportunity attacks. There's a handful of things out there that use your opportunity action that are not specifically opportunity attacks. That is once per creature's turn. So if there are 12 creatures in play, then you have an opportunity action for every single one of those creatures' turns. And then you have your immediate action, which is the once per round. That is the most directly equivalent to the 5th edition reaction. Immediate actions can be reactions, or they can be interrupts. If they're reactions, they take place after the triggering event. If they're interrupts, they take place before the triggering event. Super easy. Immediate interrupts are going to be things like the shield spell, which can invalidate the thing that triggered it. So being hit by an attack well, now I cast shield and now I'm not hit by the attack. Whereas reactions never invalidate the thing that triggered them because they take place after. Pretty simple. There is a big significant difference, however, in that you cannot use, I think, opportunity actions or immediate actions. I don't believe you can use either one of those on your turn. You can only use them on other people's turns, which kind of removes some of the funkiness of like, well, when exactly does it recharge? Well, it recharges on your turn. It doesn't matter if it's the beginning or the end because you can't use it on your turn. So when you take your turn, you're going to have start of turn stuff. Anything that takes place at the start of the turn wears off at the start of the turn, begins at the start of the turn. A lot of that mainly is going to be ongoing damage. So if you have, say, ongoing 5 fire damage, you're going to take 5 damage at the start of each of your turns. So regardless of what you intend to do on your turn, you're going to do the 5 damage first. Then you do your actions in whatever order you like, and then you do end of turn stuff. Some things wear off at the end of your turn, but also you're going to be making a saving throw against anything that says save ends. A lot of ongoing damage is save ends. My dog is barking, and he's ruining the video, and I hope he's happy. So a lot of effects that are not for a specific amount of time say save ends in parentheses. This is a duration, but it is an uncertain duration because when you have an effect on you that says save ends, at the end of each of your turns, you're going to be making a saving throw. But what ability is it based on? It's not based on any ability. A saving throw is not quite the same thing in 4th as it is in 5th. It is just a naked d20 roll. On a 10 up, you succeed. Easy. Easy. You don't need to remember any DCs. You don't need to remember what ability scores you're using. Just roll, and you have a 55% chance of success. So easy. And those take place always at the start, at the end of your turn. Usually the effects happen at the beginning, and then you roll to see if you can get rid of them at the end. There are, I want to say there's like a first aid action or something like that. If you're trained in heal, you can give an ally a saving throw, like on your turn. If it's something that you need to end it really, really soon, like it's vital that it doesn't happen on their turn, you can sort of give them an off-turn saving throw. And there's lots of powers that give saving throws too. But by default, you can make a saving throw at the end of your turn. Let's see. I've got my book here that I'm going through. So, this end of turn, start of turn, immediate actions, attacks and defenses. So, attacks. You have 4 different kinds of attacks. You have your melee attacks, ranged attacks, area attacks, and close attacks. Melee attacks and ranged attacks are single target, although the power that you're using may specify multiple targets, but it's the sort of like you pick a target and you're going to be making an attack against that target specifically. Close and area attacks define a space, and you make an attack against everyone within that space, or all enemies within that space as dictated by the power, whatever, any legal targets within that space. Importantly, close and area attacks don't suffer from concealment. Concealment only affects melee and ranged attacks. The origin square is sometimes important, particularly for determining cover and such. And let's see, the area attacks have a point of origin, which is the middle of the effect. So an area attack would say, like, area burst 1 within 10 or something like that. So that means it is a burst 1. It hits a space and each space within 1 of that. So it's a 3x3 area. And it says within 10, so that one space in the middle needs to be within 10 of you. So the point of origin for that effect would be the middle space. That space that you, it will not be the caster or the user, the character using the ability. Close attacks, I believe, do have their point of origin is the user, the character that it is coming from. But close attacks have to be adjacent to the user. So close attacks can be a burst or a blast. A blast goes out from you. It's like your burning hands type of effect. It's going to define a size, and it's going to be that many spaces across and that many spaces out, and it has to be adjacent to you. So it could be, on a corner, on a side, however you want to orient it, it has to be adjacent to you. A burst goes out from the user X number of spaces. Melee and ranged attacks just go out a certain number of spaces directly to the targets. They don't affect an area. Another big thing is that area and ranged attacks are not safe for being done in melee. They do provoke opportunity attacks. So if you've got monsters next to you and you want to make a ranged attack against anyone, even one of the monsters next to you, you're going to provoke opportunity attacks from every single one of them. That dog is making a lot of noise. I hope you guys don't hear it very much because it's annoying the heck out of me. So that is close, area, ranged, and melee. There's also walls. Walls are kind of weird. They don't come up that often. But basically the wall number tells you how many contiguous spaces it has to be. And there's rules for making sure that it stays, like everything stays adjacent, wall-like. There's a concept of line of sight and line of effect. So let's see, seeing targets, line of sight. Line of sight is anyone that you can see, and there are rules for determining whether or not you can see someone and whether they have cover from your position. And basically what it is that you pick one of your corners and draw an imaginary line to every corner of the target, or every corner of one space of the target, or no, I think it's every corner of the target. If any of those lines intersect with a hard obstacle, they have cover. If all of the lines intersect with an obstacle, they have total cover. You probably can't attack them. You don't have line of sight. Actually, I think it is more complicated than that, because like there could be holes or something like that. But basically, they have total cover, +5 to their AC, probably, or +5 to their defense against range and area attacks. Probably don't want to make that attack. Line of effect. So the difference between line of sight and line of effect is largely, it's kind of intuitive, isn't it? Line of sight is based entirely on what you can see. Line of effect has to do with like physically passing through an area. So like a fog cloud can obscure line of sight, but does not obscure line of effect, because nothing stops anything from going through the fog cloud, but you can't see through it. So line of sight, like basically if you can't see the thing, it has total concealment, which is +5 to its defenses, or -5 to your attacks. I don't remember which way it goes. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Line of effect has to do with whether or not you can actually even reach your target at all. So like a pane of glass would interrupt line of effect, but it does not interrupt line of sight. So that actually, fun fact, that's one of the concepts that when I started in 5th edition, I kind of assumed that it carried forward. It was not until a few years after playing 5th edition that I realized it wasn't in the game. It was just something that was so natural and obvious, and it didn't occur to me that they would get rid of it. Your defenses, you have your AC, Fortitude, Reflex, and Will. I've already gone over this. You should know how to calculate these things. Different attacks will target different defenses. There are resistances and vulnerabilities. Yeah, that's the next thing. Resistances and vulnerabilities. If you've played Pathfinder 2 at all, you know that resistances and vulnerabilities have values, and they increase or decrease the damage taken from those damage types. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. If a let me see if I can remember. I'm doing this from memory, so this might be wrong. Because damage can have more than one type. If damage has more than one type, a creature is vulnerable to it if they are vulnerable to any of the types, and they are resistant to it only if they have resistance to all the types. I think that's right. It might be reversed. I don't remember. It's not that important, because that situation doesn't come up very often. So there are a lot of conditions in this game. The conditions list is the same size or longer than the list of conditions in 5th edition, but you're going to be interacting with these conditions more frequently. So you have things like blinded, dazed, deafened, dominated, dying, helpless, immobilized, marked, petrified, prone, restrained, slowed, stunned, surprised, unconscious, and weakened. These all do things. Kind of feels like it'd be a long and boring video if I just read out what all the conditions do. But they are interesting and varied, and you really should have an understanding of what the conditions are and what they do if you're going to launch into playing any kind of control-y type character. So if you are going to play a controller, familiarize yourself with the list of conditions and know which ones you're gunning for and like about how valuable they are. So like weakened is the target does half damage. All the damage they do is halved. Dominated, interestingly, is the target is dazed, so it can only take one action and grants combat advantage, but you decide what that one action is. And I believe it can only make at-will powers. Yeah, you can only use at-will powers. Dazed, you take one action, you grant combat advantage. Combat advantage, actually, I'm going to go over combat advantage real quick. Combat advantage, this is before they came up with the roll 2 dice and take the better result for general advantage on checks. In 4th edition, there's just combat advantage. There's no general purpose ability advantage. Though, put an asterisk next to that because they do call giving a +2 or -2 to a check the DM's best friend. And so it's generally recommended that, like, if there's a circumstantial benefit or drawback to something, give it a +2 or a -2 as appropriate. So it's kind of the same thing because combat advantage is a +2 to attack rolls. You're going to get that by flanking. You're going to get that if someone is dazed. You're going to get that if you're doing a melee attack against someone who's prone. There's lots of different ways to get combat advantage. In general, you should be trying to get it as much as possible because a +2 is kind of a big deal. But combat advantage does not stack. You either have combat advantage or you don't. And there's no opposite. There's no combat disadvantage. I'm not going to go through all the conditions. I like this list of conditions. It's pretty good, and they come up reasonably frequently, which is what happens when you have every class has interesting and powerful abilities to interact with the game systems. The game systems tend to come up more often. You have ongoing damage, which I've already talked about. Critical hits. Critical hits only happen on a natural 20, and only if that 20 would have hit anyways. So if you need a 21 or higher to hit on the die to hit, the natural 20 is still going to hit, but it's not going to crit. I have never seen a situation where that rule is relevant, so in function, natural 20s are auto hit and crit. A crit does maximum damage. It does not double the dice. It doesn't do more damage. It just says, like, don't roll, take your maximum result. Nearly every magic weapon or magic implement does additional dice of damage on a crit. So any dice that you roll on a crit is not maximized. You only maximize dice that you would roll normally. It is possible, of course, to get an expanded crit range. That's usually a much higher level thing. Durations, you have until start of turn, until end of turn, until end of encounter, and save ends. Those are the 4 durations that are used in the game for powers. Rituals can have different durations. Until end of the encounter, by the way, lasts either until the end of the actual encounter, or if you're using it outside of an encounter, it lasts for 5 minutes. But it takes 5 minutes to get it back, so it's kind of like half on, half off, you know? There are also sustained durations, where some powers will say, like, you know, this lasts until the end of your next turn, and then there's a sustain entry at the bottom that says the duration extends until the end of your next turn. But that takes an action to do. So usually a minor action, where you are sustaining the effect by spending an action to keep it going, which is this game's pseudo equivalent to a concentration mechanic. because it is something you have to sort of actively maintain. But you can't lose it by taking damage. The only thing about overlapping durations in this is two things that have the same name don't stack, which is, I think, perfectly reasonable. And it usually wouldn't matter anyways because of typed bonuses. Have I done typed bonuses yet? I don't know if I've done a video on typed bonuses yet. So just real quick, in case I haven't, bonuses often come as a type, be it a enhancement bonus, a power bonus, a feat bonus, etc. And any two bonuses of the same type do not ever stack. So it shouldn't be an issue because most bonuses are typed. But occasionally you get these untyped bonuses, and those do not stack with each other if they have the same name. Saving throws. I've already talked about that. Attack modifiers. So there's a table of attack modifiers. Let me show you this. The attack modifiers right there. It's pretty extensive, but it's also pretty intuitive. So, like, you look at that and you think, oh man, there's like 8 or 10 conditions there that I have to memorize. Well, actually, there's combat advantage, which we already know about. Attacker is prone. It's -2 if you're not adjacent to them. It's -2 for the attacker being prone. Yes, that makes sense. It's the opposite of combat advantage. The attacker is restrained. That's in the restrained condition. And then you have cover, superior cover, concealment, total concealment. That is -2 and -5 for the lesser version and the greater version, respectively, for each of those. So those you can just remember, like that's easy to remember. -2 for regular cover or concealment, -5 for greater cover or concealment. That's easy to remember, right? And then long range is -2. So ranged weapons have a short range and a long range. If you attack at long range, it's -2. Easy. It's so easy to remember when you know that like +2, -2 is what the game itself calls the DM's best friend. So any kind of like small incidental bonus is a +2, small incidental penalty is a -2. So it's a lot of -2s on here is what it is. And then it has on here +1 if you are charging, which I'll get into when I do actions. How am I doing on time? Oh man, this video's going long already. I might make actions a separate video. So I've talked about combat advantage. We'll talk about cover and concealment. So cover is measured from the point of origin, and it affects all attacks. Concealment is only against melee and ranged attacks because you have to sort of pick your target and go for it. And so like being able to clearly visualize your target is more important. Whereas like an explosion, like a fireball, it actually doesn't care if it can see you. It's just going to hit the whole area. If you are invisible, which is not a condition. Well, maybe. Did they reprint the conditions? This condition? It's not considered a condition. It is separate. Being invisible means you can't normally be seen, so you have combat advantage against any enemy that can't see you, and you don't provoke opportunity attacks from enemies that can't see you. It's so funny to me that invisible here works exactly as intended, where it only affects things that can't see you. And then they went and changed it in 5th edition so that it affects even enemies that can see you. That's hilarious to me. All the little like incidental, pointless changes that they made to make the game worse. It's just it tickles me pink. You have movement and positioning, creature sizes. Sizes work the same way. So like medium and small take up 1 space. Large is 2x2. Huge is 3x3. Gargantuan's 4x4. It's the same. Nothing extra there. Diagonal movement works the same in 5th edition, so diagonals are always 5. Occupied squares. So there are rules for occupied squares. A square can be occupied by an ally or by an enemy. You can move through allied squares with no penalty. It's not difficult terrain like it is in 5th. You can't move through enemy spaces, though I want to say there's an acrobatics ability to let you do that. I might be wrong on that. I might be thinking of a skill power. If I wasn't already recording, I would look it up, but that is not the case. You can't end your movement in any other creature's square unless it is an allied square who is prone. If they are prone, you can end your movement in their space. But then I believe they can't stand up. Let's see. Double move. So real quick, I'm not going to get into the actions in this video. I'm going to make that a separate video because I'm already running a little long. But if you take two actions that both let you move, you can combine that movement into a single movement, which is important for things like difficult terrain, where you might have like an odd number of spaces of movement. You get that twice in difficult terrain, so you still get that extra space of movement, where you would lose it if you weren't able to combine. So it's a little quality of life rule there. Falling damage is a D10 damage. This is a little bit different. D10 damage for every 5 feet that you fall. Sorry, for every 10 feet that you fall. If you fall more than 50 feet, take 25 damage per 50 feet. This is just a fast alternative for like quick calculating. You fall prone when you land unless you take no damage from the fall. Also, if you're trained in acrobatics, you can make a check to reduce the amount of damage you take from the fall. So being trained in acrobatics makes you better at falling. There's also rules for like catching yourself. And I want to say there's a rule for like if you are intentionally jumping down, you reduce the distance by 10 feet, but I might be thinking of something else. I don't see that here. Flanking. There are rules for flanking. These are not optional rules like they are in 5th edition. So there's rules for determining how, whether or not you are flanking for larger creatures, mainly where it's important. You get combat advantage for flanking. It's good. You should try to flank. Push, pull, and slide. So, these are the forced movement types. Push is always away from the thing that is pushing you. Pull is always towards the thing that is pulling you. Slide is in any direction. These are forced movement. They never provoke opportunity attacks. They kind of have to stay along the same plane of movement, so you can't push someone diagonally upward and then make them fall. That's not allowed. Notably, if you try to push someone off a cliff, they get a saving throw. They get a saving throw to try to catch themselves at the edge, which I think is a nice little elegant way to represent, catching yourself on the ledge, where you fall prone at the edge. Funny thing, dwarves not only reduce the distance that they are pushed, pulled, or slid, they also get a saving throw to prevent going prone. So actually, they would, if you are able to get them off a cliff, which is harder, they would get a second saving throw to not be prone at the edge. So that's really cool. Like, dwarves are so hard to bully around like that. Let's see, there's teleportation, which of course is very, very powerful. It only requires line of sight. It does not require line of effect. And it doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. The next, there's a little thing in here about phasing, which is like the ability to go through objects and walls. I'm not going to talk about that. That's not important for here. We're just learning how to play the game, right? The next section is on actions in combat. So before I get into that, we're going to make that a separate video. I do want to talk about opportunity attacks and movement, because it's not been explicit thus far, but here's something that you're going to, it's kind of like a culture shock for if you have mainly played 5th edition, you start playing 4th, this is something you're going to notice immediately. Movement is way less easy. You provoke opportunity attacks when you leave a threatened space, or leave a space adjacent to an enemy. Because unless they have threatening reach, actually reach does not increase your ability to make opportunity attacks. It's only adjacent spaces. But as soon as you leave a space adjacent to an enemy, not when you leave their threatened area. So like if you have, one guy here and you are wanting to run past him, you get boom, you're adjacent. You move one more space, they get an opportunity attack on you, even if it's part of the same action, even if you weren't going to leave their threatened area. So you're going to notice that enemies are a lot more dangerous. It's very difficult to sort of bob and weave through an area of enemies because you're going to be getting a lot of free attacks on you, and you just can't afford to take that many free attacks. No one in this game is tough enough to just sort of not care about taking opportunity attacks at all. It can feel like you are sometimes, but I guarantee you, your luck will run out. So you do have to an extent, respect enemy melee forces, which is why it is important to know about your movement options. And I'll get into the actions in here about like shifting to get around opportunity attacks. But also, like, forced movement does not provoke opportunity attacks, which is why the Bard is like it's a chief reason why the Bard is so good, because their majestic word power, which they can use twice per encounter, not only heals for a large chunk of somebody's health, but also slides them one space, which can get them away from an enemy, which means that on their turn, they don't have to spend an action shifting away and getting away. That is something that you would notice right away. Flanking is very powerful. You want to flank, but getting into a flanking position can be difficult without provoking, because you can't just like get in and slide to where you need to be. You need to enter the enemy's threatened ring where you need to be, instead of just getting in there and sort of scooching around and getting your position. You can sometimes, like if you're one space off, you could just spend a move action to shift, get in there. I'll get into shifting next time. But you are going to notice that everyone is stickier. Any kind of melee combatant is pretty sticky, which means that you have to sort of respect them a bit more. Whereas in 5th edition, you can kind of run circles around, like literally run circles around melee combatants. They can't do anything about it until you try to leave. And even then, like an opportunity attack tends to not be that consequential. Because they don't scale with level like your hit points are. Like everyone's getting higher defenses and more hit points as level goes up, and opportunity attacks really don't scale. Whereas in this, they do. So watch out for those. So those are the basics of combat. Next time I will do actions, because there's a lot of them. And so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each one. More detail than I went into with the conditions. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. All right. So see you next time.